Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we're sailing out a new Tier V American Battleship, known as the New York, in a Tier VII Domination game on the map Estuary. The focus of today's gameplay is on a +2 matchmaking scenario in the New York. Now in general, when you're confronted with +2 matchmaking, in a good number of cases you may be psychologically inclined to think I'm going to be worthless in terms of contribution compared to my teammates in their higher tier ships. And that's natural to think that because statistically your ship is going to be weaker compared to the ships around you. Because you'll have typically the lower fire rate, you'll have lower HP, you'll have lower options available to you. And in the New York, I think this is one of those ships that really acts as an example of that psychological impact in feeling worthless. Because statistically it's not a ship to celebrate, even at its own tier. Now whether it be the maximum top speed of 21 knots, all the way through to its poor dispersion, whatever maximum dispersion at max range, 269 metres at 20.9 kilometres, and rather poor shell grouping in general. There's a number of things that really hurt this ship in terms of performance. But it's not a means to write the ship off dramatically, and instead just try to make it work. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here, try and get the most out of the ship and play the situation as it goes. So I'm immediately committing towards Objective Delta. The logic behind this is that I'm enforced to go to Delta because of my lack of speed, and knowing that if I went to Alpha it'd be a long range engagement and my guns are not going to cut it. Now I'm also aware of the fact that because of the centre mounted nature of my 5th turret, whereby we have 5 pairs of 356mm cannon, which will do 10,300 damage per citadel of armour piercing, which we'll come on to in a second. What it means is I have to expose pretty much a full broadside when going forward in order to be able to use all 5 pairs of guns. If I'm retreating, I don't have to expose as much broadside, but typically I want to be going forward for the opening half of this match to try and garner attention and support my teammates on the front line. Therefore, what I have to consider is if I'm going to expose broadside, I need to time it right and I want to use that broadside to bait people into shooting me. Now what we have to consider is the armour of this ship is not too great and it can be overmatched on the bow by the likes of the Colorado, and it's going to be vulnerable to IFHE. The deck armour is not going to withstand IFHE. But in return, with the enemy carriers planes coming over this way, we've got multiple cruisers around us, so we're shielded from them, and the enemy Pensacola is not shielded from armour piercing, as you're going to see here. And perhaps if we'd been given just a little bit less lead, perhaps we would have taken them completely out of the game in a single salvo. But we can dream. Now moving forward, what this goes to show firstly is as the salvo comes from the Congo, I'm reacting to that because I've been cutting my speed back and forth. And in return, I'm also using the 600 metre turn circle radius of the ship in order to frustrate the aim of my opponents. Because what you have to consider is this is a slow ship and it turns tightly. Which means that at longer distances, i.e. 15 kilometers plus, it's going to be a hard ship to hit if a captain is constantly changing up direction, as we throw a salvo towards the enemy Koenig, coming in towards Delta. Not really getting much, but we've hit them. Now my focus at this point is turned towards the enemy Budioni, because I'm aware of the fact that if that Russian Tier 6 cruiser has IFHE, they're going to start ripping into my health pool. And I'm getting ready for the tanking scenario, because I'm already looking at the minimap and thinking to myself, what are my team doing? And I can see that they're all gradually clustering towards the western border of the map, quite literally. So I'm going to go forward a little bit and tank some damage. But in doing so, what I'm actually doing here is coming to a halt and I'm going to go into reverse very slightly. Now the importance of going into reverse at this point is not because I'm running away, but because I don't want to overextend into the objective to be hit via a crossfire, i.e. the enemy ships up in the north versus the enemy ships up towards the northwest who can hit me on the broadside. So instead, by reversing and trying to just slightly re-angle my ship, I'm going to try and avoid taking too much damage from the likes of the enemy Koenig, the likes of the Fiji, the likes of the Pensacola, the Budioni and the Colorado, and try to mitigate that as much as possible. And in return, punish those broadsides that are offered to me, as seen again here. Now of course in doing this what I have to consider is I'm now starting to pick up the brunt of the enemy's attention, and with a health pool 49,100 it's not the biggest health pool in this match by far, and that means it's not going to be unlimited and it can be brought down quite rapidly. So instead I'm already thinking about where am I going to go to avoid being knocked out of the game. Well, there's a landmass off to my port side, and what I will do shortly is start making my way towards it. But I can't afford to go charging towards it just yet, because if I do I'll be given a full broadside to all the ships north of me. So I'm getting ready to make my way to that landmass, but I'm pulling back far enough so that way I can start to head to it in a northwesterly orientation, which means I can angle against the enemy ships to my northwest, and I can angle against the enemy ships to my north. It's not going to take away all the damage, but it means the damage I do take will be significantly less. I've had to use one heal, so my heal's now on a reload, and I'm down to under half HP. And this is where I've timed it so that way I do decide to now move towards that landmass. I'm going to push forward and not be wiped out the game too soon. And we can see here with only one fire set, that's because we have the fire prevention captain skill in play, and it's really coming in handy, taking away a good chunk of the fire damage we would have otherwise received. That buddy Oni is pushing in a little bit too far, and we're going to try and get them out the game. Throwing in the salvo here. There they go, they're out the game, that dangerous cruiser. And now creeping towards that landmass, I'm having to give it a little bit of additional broadside here to the enemy conga just to pick up a bit of speed and get into the landmass. But what you'll see is I will try to slightly re-angle towards the conga if needs be. Here we go. So that way we mitigate the damage, particularly from the enemy Fiji, who's now throwing in shells as well. Albeit their 6-inch guns aren't going to do as much damage against the angle broadside. And in making our way towards the landmass, we'll be able to shield ourselves from further damage, and it means that we're going to end this engagement still alive, even though we're in a crippled state, relatively, and one could argue that we've thrown away all of our health. But have we really seen as we can heal a good chunk of this? And now we can let our teammates who went down the eastern border do some work instead. Because we've done our job for the time being, we've contributed, let's get that Pensacola out of the game if we can. Well, not quite, but we've got 1 over penetration, so that'll do some extra damage to them, and they're on a critical state of health. But still, the point stands. We've now tanked a load of damage, we've drawn a lot of attention. The potential damage that we've looked at has almost been 1,900,000, and it means that we can now afford to pull a bit of distance, we'll take our time, and get ready with our guns to fire continuous salvos against the broadsides of enemy ships that are now focused in our team's crossfire towards our ships over on the eastern border. And in return, we can perhaps pick up some damage and start to do what the enemy team were doing to us, i.e. trying to rip us out of the game. Picking up only 1 over penetration sadly on the New Mexico there, but again they were angling away, it wasn't the best salvo. And what you'll see I'm doing here as well is I'm making my way towards our independence. Now the logic behind this is the enemy carrier is still in play, and whilst they seem very fixated on our independence at this point, if I make my way towards the independence, if they've got any fighters available or just their raw AA, I may be able to loan some of that in order to defend my ship. But it looks as though the enemy carrier is going for the elimination of our carrier, so we're going to be quite fortunate here and get away with the fact we're actually isolated from any AA screens right now. And hopefully that's the death of the enemy Pensacola. There we go, another cruiser out the game. Now with our independence taking the brunt of the enemy carrier's attack, I'm making my way towards our friendly Colorado instead very shortly. Because what I'm aware of the fact is if the Independence goes down, the next ship closest to me that has a considerable AA suite and was within a reasonable distance and position to get to is the Colorado. It's not our cruisers over on the eastern side, because they're right in the middle of a battlefield. And whilst this is all going on, I'm using the time to get all of my heals off until I've repaired all the damage I can repair. Because as you can see, we were down to under 9,000 health, we're now back up to what's going to be approximately 18,000 or 19,000 health. So we're back in the game for a good while, because we've got enough health in order to be able to get back into the fight. We cannot, of course, be back on the front line like we were in the first instance, because that will cause us to be ripped apart. But the number of enemy ships now down, we can afford to be perhaps a little bit more aggressive compared to Phase 2 of this game. Phase 1 was our initial push forward and absorb damage. Phase 2 was the retreat and heal. Phase 3 is the return push, looking towards the enemy ships over in the northeastern corner and trying to bring them down. Now coming about at this point, this is where I'm orientating my ship towards the Colorado, because I want to be safe first before I make my push, because what I have to remember is I am only a tier 5 ship, I don't have the AA suite of a tier 7, and in the meantime we're catching the Fiji in a crossfire. I'm not going to punish them here, it looks as though they've slowed down in order to go to smoke or just avoid incoming fire. Although we do pick up one very fortunate, I must say, Bow Citadel. I did not expect that, and that took me by surprise even when I recorded the match in the first instance, and that was a good one. So we'll keep moving forward, we'll take that on our shoulder, and we'll keep looking at the Fiji as they now go to retreat. And you can see how we're setting up that awkward crossfire situation of the fact no matter which way they either angle against our allies on the east, and that means they're exposed to us, or they angle against us, which would be in their relative southwest, and therefore they're exposed to our allies. And hopefully here we can get another juicy salvo. Another citadel, and that's another 11,000 health off of that Fiji. They're not having a good time anymore. And we'll just keep on making our way back. And remember, when the Fiji's in a less advantageous firing position, perhaps we'll have to go for the Colorado instead. Let's not get target fixation here, although it would be nice to get rid of that cruiser if we can. And that's one thing as well. You'll note that the enemy team spent a lot of time shooting at myself and our friendly Miyoko, when really the ships they should have been looking towards were the ships heading down the eastern border of the map on our team. And that's something that a lot of people can be baited into when you're a lower tier ship, in the thought of constantly trying to shoot at you, the low tier ship, because you're the easy damage in their mind, whereas actually you're not the easy damage because you're wasting their time and wasting their ammunition. Now, linked up with the Colorado at this point, I don't have to get literally into kissing distance of them, just close enough so that way if the enemy carrier wants to go for me, they realise that they've got to take some damage from the Colorado's AA suite. That's the reason I've linked up, and now I can start to make my way back towards Objective Delta. We've been out of the fight for a bit, and I must admit it's gone down to a case of long range sniping now. But remember, for every time you're on the front line, for every second you're on the front line, it's always wise to perhaps spend half a second to a second also on the back line. You can't always be in the front line of the battleship. You're not invulnerable. You have a big health pool, you can absorb damage, but it's not unlimited. And we've said that time and time again over battleship gameplays on this channel, and it really comes to fruition after a while. I'm sorry if I hammer it home, but that's the way I look at it. If you're always interested in how I think in games, I remind myself on core principles that I hold, and this is one of them. Battleships are tough, but they're not invulnerable by any means. I'm also trying to effectively farm damage at this point, which does sound a little bit pathetic, seeing as I'm not on the front line, so there's nothing I can do other than try to farm the damage that my teammates are setting up for me, those crossfires once again. And this is where we of course do have that downside of the New York lacking the speed to get back into the fight, where really I'd want to be closer to the Colorado at this point to draw their attention away from our friendly DeGrasse, who seems to be under a lot of oppressive fire from the armour piercing of the Colorado. But given a broadside here, perhaps we'll be able to punish them, or at least knock a good chunk of their health off and almost get them out of the game. Well, fingers crossed. Well, not quite, but we've got them down to a health state now where those fires will take them apart, or our friendly Colorado finishes them off from behind. Good shot on their part. And now it's only 3 enemy ships left. The carrier has been pushed all the way up into the northeastern corner of the map, the Congo and the Fiji. And it wouldn't be lovely if we could finish off that Fiji with one final salvo. But to do it, we're going to have to try and shoot over a landmass by the looks of things. Of course, the Congo is quite a juicy target as well, but the Fiji is one of those ones that could go back into smoke if it's got smoke available, and use the Congo as a spotting tool in order to do some last-ditch damage to our teammates. So instead, we'll go for the Fiji. They seem to be the closer target as well. Both targets, pardon me, now being behind a landmass, but the Fiji is in such a position where I've got the better shot over the landmass, I personally feel. We're just going to bide our time. Remember, we've got a 34.3 second reload on this ship. It's not as grand as the standard 30-second reload on other battleships, so we have to make the most of every reload we have. And I mean, I haven't been doing that perfectly in this game. That's what I'm conscious of. So getting ready to hit the Fiji. They're exposed and they're coming around to a lower portion of the landmass. We're only going to need one shield to do it, right? Waiting and waiting. Come on, fire. It only takes one shell to do it, and with the Fiji out of the game, that's 3 cruisers eliminated on our part. A little celebratory smile in the chat there from myself. I felt really happy with that shot. It was a cheesy little shot, one shell going straight compared to all the others, but that's what the dispersion on the New York can do. It can surprise even the player. And that's just a case of looking towards the Congo and trying to help get them out of the game as they fire towards us. But again, because we're moving so slowly, it may be the case that actually they don't have to give as much lead as they did there. That's one thing you have to be aware of when you're playing against a New York. Remember, it's a slow hulk of a ship. It's not ludicrously fast. It can't do ludicrous speed, unlike the guys in Spaceballs. So instead, looking at the Congo, they're going back behind the landmass at this point. You note that I'm in a position whereby I do have 1 heal remaining, and with our health pool, it means that I can offset any future damage I take from the Congo. As long as it's not stupid damage, I give a full broadside and take multiple citadels. So I've always kept that in mind as well. What damage can I take and how much can I continue to heal? I can't heal any more for the time being because I'm at the maximum healable state. And it looks as though we're not actually going to get another shot on that Congo, sadly. Or the fact that behind the landmass, perhaps we'll get one final salvo as they come out, but it'll be an angled one. So instead, we're just going to gradually make our way in towards Objective Delta. And you'll note here that I have slowed down a little bit, A, to try and get the shot on the Congo, but more importantly, because I don't want to drift too far from our Colorado, because whilst the enemy carrier isn't really doing much at the moment, they could make one last ditch attempt at trying to finish off a crippled ship, and they may go for us if they saw us by ourselves. So instead I'm making sure the Colorado is right there to provide that potential AA support, or at least the looming threat of AA guns. But with the Congo falling, as I said, all that's going to happen now is I'm going to help capture Objective Delta, and the game's going to end in terms of points rather than the enemy independence being sunk. So let's skip to the post-game stats. So a bit of a rough game at first, but we pulled through in the end, working with our team to secure the victory. We can see that our total damage output was 86,779 HP. Looking at the team scores, we can see that we came second on our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 1,927, not too far behind first place either. This serves to highlight that a Tier 5 such as the New York can have a considerable impact over the course of a Tier 7 match. In this case, our role throughout the match was split into 3 phases. Phase 1 was the initial push towards Objective Delta, whereby we drew attention and tanked a considerable amount of damage, whereas our allies pushed down the very eastern border of the map rather slowly at first, but built up momentum as we moved into Phase 2, which was to move into cover and start retreating and healing the damage we took, before we moved into Phase 3, which was working with our teammates to set up the final crossfire in order to eliminate the enemy ships that were exposed, such as the enemy Fiji and the enemy Colorado. It's worth noting that the enemy ships in the first phase did try to take us out via the means of their own crossfire, but we were prepared for it and we used the characteristics of the New York to our advantage, i.e. the turn circle radius in particular. Coming on to our detailed report, we have 2 key items to note here, which both focus around the concept of that initial phase of tanking and diverting the enemy's attention. The first is in the team play category of potential damage, almost 2 million. It goes to show that we did attract a lot of enemy attention, and therefore all those shells that were destined for our ship were not destined to hurt our allies. And secondly, in the damage received category, we can see that we picked up 54,286, quite a bit over our maximum health pool of 49,100, not enough to warrant us the Dreadnought achievement, but heading that way. If we're taking some more damage towards the end, if we've been able to position ourselves correctly to be back in the front line sooner, perhaps that's something we can work on. We've been able to tank some more damage, do some more damage in return, and therefore pick up the Dreadnought over time. But still, an admirable effort, I think, for the situation we had. And finally, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, we walked away with 243,676 silver credits and 5,782 commander experience. To conclude, hopefully today we've demonstrated that whilst it's easy to write yourself off in a +2 matchmaking scenario because your ship statistics will not stack up to your +2 matchmaking counterparts or even perhaps ships at the same tier as your own, this is not a reason to throw your ship away at the start, but instead appreciate the fact that actually if you read the situation correctly and use the strengths of your ship to your advantage, you'll be able to have a considerable impact on the game. And that's exactly what we did in the New York here. We are aware of our limited tanking ability, we could take too much attention, but we could withstand some attention for a good period of time. We made the most of that in order to shield our teammates in terms of potential damage they could have taken. We punched a broadside to some cruisers that potentially became overconfident, or in the end we caught them in a crossfire towards the end, such as the enemy Fiji, and it meant we were able to assist our team in pushing down the eastern side of the map and help win the game. In short then, I would say that in these situations, remember that you're bottom tier, not bottom feeder. And so I've been TX141, and if you've enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships content on my channel. And remember, if you want to sign up to World of Warships, a free-to-play game today, you can do so using the link in the description of this video. It's a great game, it takes a little while getting used to, but once you do, it can be thoroughly enjoyable for both you and your friends. But until next time, as always, ladies and gentlemen, remember to take care and fair seas.